Nikhil, it's a pleasure to have you with us. How have you been doing?
All good, Anshu. Great to be here, and thank you for inviting me on your platform.
Nikhil, this is, I have particularly been interested and, excited about, the alternate investing space, right? There's so much which is happening, right? And I think also the fact, I mean, I've spent a lot of time in banking, right? And I've spent a lot of time across equity and debt instruments and many such instruments, right? That a typical or a traditional banking ecosystem offered, right? For the longest time, right? And, while we continue to struggle in the early days, right? Around building more awareness, what I see today is a very different kind of an audience, right? An audience which is out there experimenting, which is wanting to look at the math of it, and not necessarily stuck up with, banking instruments or say safer instruments in that sense, right? Or very, very traditional instruments. Let me put it that way, right? They're very open to newer instruments that are now available in the market, right? And I think Grip is doing that in a very effective way. But before we dive into that, Nikhil, I would love you to run us through, your background. And a quick introduction will be helpful, and
Sure.
then we dive into the Grip story of things.
Yeah, very happy to do that. And I think the story of Grip, or the reason for starting Grip, actually comes from experiences that I've had in my background, which is very
Sure.
common for a founder, right? You pick
Right.
up on your own experiences and something that you may see as an opportunity at different parts of your career. Um, I'm an economics graduate and then an MBA from FMS,
Right.
batch of 2009.
Right.
Started my career with HSBC, one financial crisis back, right? Financial crisis to to crisis.
Right.
And in 2009, HSBC was actually rebuilding its mortgage portfolio, home loan
Right.
mortgage portfolio. And I was part of the strategy team to think of everything from pricing, incentive, credit policy, retention for the customer base.
Right.
I spent 7 months there, part of the strategy team, and we built about 100 crore portfolio in that period of time.
Interesting.
Capital markets started opening up in early 2010, and I
Right.
got a chance to move to Morgan Stanley's investment banking team
Hmm.
as an analyst, looking
Right.
at both capital markets and M&A. Over a period of time, I focused on technology, real estate, and automotive as sectors.
Right.
If you remember, you must have remembered the time. It was incredibly active for the Indian economy,
Right.
and we saw a tremendous amount of deal volumes. Morgan Stanley was obviously a leader when it came to banking, and
Right.
I had a phenomenal learning curve.
Right.
Did about 20 transactions, and I think the ones that are most memorable and relevant today was working with a lot of the unicorns of today, very
Mhm.
early in their growth, the Flipkarts of the world, but
Right.
also data analytic companies, vertical SaaS, B2B SaaS companies,
Right.
and really advising them on their journey. The other very relevant milestone was to work with SEBI to draft the REIT and InvIT regulations.
Hmm.
Morgan Stanley was an advisor to SEBI, but
Right.
and then also an advisor to Blackstone, Brookfield,
Right.
on the back of which now the REIT IPOs have happened.
Sure.
You can draw a similarity between what Grip does on the fixed income side to the almost like a REIT structure for
Right.
non-real estate assets. I left my role at Morgan Stanley in 2016 to start my
Hmm.
first company, a mobility startup called Chalo.
Interesting.
Chalo is today India's largest private operator of city buses.
Very
What
interesting.
most people don't know is that city buses in majority of our cities are actually run by private operators and not
Right.
by the government of India. We tend to live in tier one cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, where it's the
Right.
government that runs the buses, but outside of that, it's private operators.
Right.
And Chalo has aggregated close to 3,000 buses that it runs on its platform. Pre-COVID, they were doing about 45 million passenger trips every month and about $60 million in ticket revenue every year. I was chief operating officer and co-founder for that business, and was part of the organization till 2019. Um, I continued to remain a shareholder, but stepped
Right.
out of my operating role and moved to the World Bank as a public policy consultant for transportation and electric vehicles.
Interesting.
Yeah, very an opportunity to see the same problem for a very different lens.
Right.
And organizations like World Bank think of things at at a scale that few of us can imagine. So it was
Absolutely.
very fantastic opportunity for me
Right.
to be in that place and look at the same problem from their perspective. I continue to be a consultant with them, but the hunger to start again and build again caught me, and the bug caught me again. And in 2020, June
Right.
2020, exactly a year back, we started Grip. So that's my background. So Grip sort of brings together what I saw in the mobility space and the startup ecosystem, where capital was required to scale up by having assets, At the same time, what I saw in from my experience at Morgan Stanley, where there was a requirement for more fixed income products,
Right.
and there was a huge investor appetite for it, and that's how Grip came to happen.
Very interesting, Nikhil. That's some experience, right? I mean, I'm not sure if there are many founders who can have that kind of a diversity in their careers, right? From being a banker to doing a mobility startup, something that you're not particularly from, moving to World Bank. And I mean, I work with a bunch of such institutions, right? And the kind of impact that they want to sort of create, right? Like you said, right? It's a very different lens, right? And I think more than the scale, I think impact is I've been particularly excited about that bit, right? And especially the way they look at it and they break it down, where many people can sort of have an advantage of a certain act and event. I think it's absolutely phenomenal, right? And I think like you said, right? I think there's always been a huge appetite for assets in the fixed income space and so on and so forth, right? Oh, which is absolutely fantastic, right? So Nikhil, with that, let's dive into journey of creating Grip, right?
Sure.
It's been a very interesting product. I mean, you gave us where the possibly the genesis happened from, right? Take us through the journey of creating Grip. I mean, you launched right in the middle of the pandemic, right? Which possibly wasn't the best of time for many businesses, which was set in a certain way, were, kind of beautifully designed with all of their inefficiencies, right? And here is a business which just sort of, what a beautiful accident, right? Tell us a little more about it.
Yeah, I like the word beautiful accident. I think that's a great way to describe it. Maybe just set context about Grip, and then I'll talk about the journey. So we curate investment opportunities in lease finance, where we identify companies who are looking for assets, and then we place these opportunities on our platform for individual investors to participate in and effectively lease assets to companies,
right?
Invest money to lease assets to companies. I think that if I can break up the journey into really two parts, one more on the team part of building and one on the opportunity part or the capital part of building. I think the team part is actually the far more interesting part of this journey. And for any startup, right? We are now a team of 25 people, but we had to hire this team entirely online.
Right.
And I've only met my team once, right? In 1 year. While I've met a few of them and especially my co-founders more frequently, but it's been a very interesting challenge to build a new business, set culture, values, vision, and have everyone aligned to a team which has only met once. And that's true for all of my colleagues, right? I think what we're very humbly proud of is the fact that we've been able to do that with a great amount of success, with almost 0% attrition, and have a team that is working well together. I wish there was a special sauce, but I think it's been constantly thinking about culture. It's been constantly thinking about work activities that we can do online for our team to feel united, to feel one. And I think the other part that we've been successful at is providing tremendous amount of information and transparency to our employees about how the company is doing, right? And I think that has helped them help in building that vision. On the opportunities part and more the business part, I think we've been fairly successful at identifying certain sectors which are likely to actually benefit from a lockdown. Okay? For example, logistics and warehousing. We've all seen boom because of last mile delivery, higher amount of e-commerce. And we picked those opportunities or those sectors to play in very early on as being the right bets. We now work with companies like Udaan, mobility companies like Vogo, Zip, and as their businesses have grown in the last year, that has also allowed our business to grow.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think the story of the growth, the ability to see growth in the last year has been based on building a team, ensuring that they are really being able to sync, and second is to pick the right sectors to place bets on.
Right. Interesting.
Obviously, been just I think we've been helped, and I still remember a webinar or a session I attended through NASSCOM a few years back, where one of the US VCs basically did a research to identify what is a common success factor among all startups. And that research over decades pointed to one single fact, which was timing. Okay. I think we've been tremendously lucky when it comes to timing, and a beautiful accident where stock markets have been tremendously volatile. Fixed deposits have been as low as ever. Inflation has been high, so that the real income from fixed income is lower.
Absolutely.
And that has created an opportunity for us to introduce a new higher yield fixed income product.
And honestly, I think one very significant thing that has happened during this period, right, is that real estate, which was considered to be the safest, right, and when it came to India, I think has gone through a very very rough patch, right. Bullion again was a very exciting area, but never yielded, for example, the kind of fixed returns that one would sort of look at, right. So, and
Yeah,
I think yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I kind of agree with you. You mentioned a bunch of things about the team, Nikhil, and I'll come to that a little later, right, because
sure.
team I think is the only constant, right, which can help you
Yeah,
survive rough waters, right? And I will come to that on in just a bit around aspects around leadership and so on and so forth, right? But I think what is particularly exciting is that you're literally sort of playing the role of a portfolio manager, right? Take me through some of the design level things at the product, right? That Grip offers, right? So take me through the process of how each stakeholder behaves in the process. I think that will be interesting for many who want to watch this video to understand the method and the process around what you offer.
sure. So we've, as I mentioned, we call ourselves a curated platform because we don't put any deal that comes up. We basically look at each deal,
Sure.
and if I could, break down that what that curated platform means across divisions.
Right.
First is we have an in-house business development team who looks at certain key opportunities, key sectors
Right.
based on thesis to identify specific leasing opportunities.
Right.
The second is again an in-house credit team, which has basically set certain guardrails or principles on the
Mm-hmm.
basis of which a deal would be capable of being listed on our platform.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you must remember that we also invest in all of our deals ourselves, and
Right.
hence we're overly cautious about the kind of investment opportunity that we create.
Right.
Once a deal passes through our business development and credit process, it gets listed in a easy to digest manner on our platform, and we only have a digital process. There is no
Right.
offline, there is no paperwork. Everything from a payment to documentation process is completely built online by our
Mm-hmm.
tech team.
Right.
At the end of the process, we also have a asset management team, right?
Right.
Because ultimately our security comes from the assets that we own.
Correct.
And from day one, this team is responsible for tracking, insurance, and building mechanisms in the event of default for recovery and sale, right?
Right.
So throughout the life cycle of the deal, we've built processes and teams within the company to identify, analyze, and then manage the risk of each opportunity.
Right.
I think we're very proud of the fact that we've had zero default, no delay in
Right.
payments, no NPA over the last 1 year, but
Right.
that has come about by constantly thinking about this process and constantly thinking about how to manage that risk. Right.
Right.
I think that's part one. Part two is to give a great investment experience, have
Mm-hmm.
a seamless online process for investors.
Right.
You said investors have already gone through other journeys, right, on
Right.
mutual funds, etc.
Right.
And if we are delivering a new product, we're already adding a degree of complication and new information to be provided.
Right.
We have to be able to provide an equally easy journey with respect to making that investment decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of our investors consume information on our platform and
Right.
make their own decision, but we have tried to make it as easy as possible for them to do so.
Very interesting. Nikhil, I have a bunch of questions around the product, right?
Sure.
You've given a very macro perspective, a very fair perspective, right, in terms of how it goes. So, essentially what is happening? Is this like a tripartite agreement? Does the consumer get into an agreement with you where you are the asset manager and then you place those bets? Or is this a certain, proportion of capital that, gets contributed from Grip Invest as an entity, right? So, for example, say
Sure.
that could be a 30-70 structure or a 60-40 structure, right? But there's a certain amount of capital contribution that happens from Grip's, say, war chest, and then a certain portion comes from public funds or the aggregated funds that you have. How does that piece work, right? What is the agreement structure, the layering structure?
Sure. So in all deals, Grip on an overall portfolio basis, Grip takes only a 2% share in a deal. Okay.
Okay.
The 98% comes actually from investors,
Sure.
and all of it comes from individual investors, not
Right.
institutional investors.
Sure.
Right. We currently have about 3,000 investors who have invested on the platform. Interestingly, and as a side note, 50% of them have already invested a second time, and
Okay.
10% of them are already on their fifth investment. So we're
Oh,
seeing a very high repeat rate of investment on our platform.
right.
to answer your question on the structure, Grip is simply a platform to discover and transact. The money that we take never comes into Grip, right? Because I think that would be wrong on our part to then allocate money. So we operate as a deal by deal investment. Investors choose the specific deal in which they want to participate by leasing assets, and the collective group of investors own the assets that are leased to the leasee, to the company.
Okay.
The money then flows back to them directly. It does not ever come through Grip.
Okay.
They do sign an agreement with Grip, where Grip acts as a servicer to their lease agreement and works on a monthly basis to provide them the lease payments. But we create almost like a silo where the money flows directly from them to purchase the assets and to receive the lease income. What it also ensures, Anshu, is that investors are do not have any kind of cross obligation on the different deals on our platform. If an investor chooses to invest or lease to company X, their risk is limited to company X and to that opportunity. It is completely siloed for investors.
Interesting. Nikhil, tell me a little more about the credit, the credit assessment that you're doing, right? So are you doing it at a is this like a typical credit assessment system that we follow in a banking ecosystem? Is that what you're following? You largely depend on public information which is available. How does that piece work out? Or is there an independent proprietary system that you've built, right, which is a combination of traditional plus say a lot of newer factors, nuances? How do you do that bit?
Sure. I would say we are very similar to what a banking system would do, or a NBFC would do when they look at SME credit risk. We've obviously built certain additional elements that are specific to the kind of opportunities that we're looking at, and to the fact that we're a leasing platform. Majority of our companies are still early stage venture or startups. They may be unicorns like Udaan, but they are still early stage ventures. And hence, along with looking at typical financial and credit metrics, we also look at things like cash burn, promoter profile, kind of investors that are in the business. Obviously, our lease terms, Anshu, are 2 to 3 years in duration. And hence, our view on credit is also over that 2 to 3 years rather than more of an equity style long-term credit evaluation. I think the other thing that differentiates us is that we look at the asset, because that's an additional security that we have. And if the asset is something that is easy to recover as an active secondary market, it really allows us to enhance the credit profile and take a more aggressive view on doing an opportunity, on pursuing an opportunity. Some of these assets are, maybe if I can give an example, very unsexy, but those are actually the best assets to go after, right? Often. For example, one of our core focuses in the company is to do warehousing racks. Okay. These are iron alloy racks which are used for vertical storage in warehouses, right? It doesn't get unsexier than
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But these assets don't depreciate because they're so solid, right? And they have a very active secondary market. So when we find opportunities like this, we go more aggressive on them, right? So our credit evaluation is a combination of company profile, leasing profile, as well as asset profile.
Interesting.
I think we have a journey to do. We have more learnings to do, constantly discover what are the other things that we can look at from a perspective of improving not only the initial credit evaluation, but we also do a monthly update on all our leases, a portfolio update. While the company provides us their financial information, what are the other things that we can look for publicly available that can allow us to do a better assessment of credit? And that's the part that our credit team is working on.
Very interesting. Nikhil, I have a specific question around the investor side of things, right? But before I jump onto that, there's a very important point that you highlighted in the conversation, right? Is basically a monthly reporting, right? How does that happen, right? Is the company which you have provided this capital support to in the structure that you have? Is there a reporting structure that you have with them, or is this something that how does that communication flow happen?
So every month, the company that we have leased or our investors have leased to is required to send us an updated MIS, financial MIS, which includes their key business metrics, their financial performance, as well as a position of cash, right, and liabilities. That allows us to update our own view of the company, in which direction is heading, and identify what we call as yellow flags,
Sure.
for when things may be starting to go wrong,
Right.
and then allows us to take action which will protect our investors by either speaking to the company, recovering our assets, etc. So
Right.
that is the reason for this, and that is the information we collect. We're obviously looking to constantly enhance that information, but
Right.
also look for other triggers or other signs. For example, GST returns, right?
Right.
Or one thing we're trying to
Right.
find is, can we look at Glassdoor, for example, to see if there are negative reviews of the company from employees,
Right.
or are there social media reviews that are suddenly changed direction, right? And can this be triggers to how a company may be performing? And
Right.
that's the piece that we're now building.
Very interesting, Nikhil. I think very interesting. And and particularly what I like is, like the way you highlighted, right? The unsexier opportunities. And I think, but Nikhil, tell me this, right? Doesn't that slow you down? Because you're possibly then taking a call saying that, listen, this is something that we want to invest in. This is something that we don't want to invest, right? So there could be a very, very exciting business which has, say, 8 to 10 pieces where you possibly can integrate your solution, right? And make that opportunity available to the investors. But then you're sort of choosing, saying that, listen, this is not something that we're going to go after because of, say, whatever issues, right? That specific opportunity could entail. And you're choosing just about a few, right? So doesn't that slow you down, or is that a cautious approach that you want to take early on, given that we're still a very, very traditional offline economy, and which operates at many, many layers?
Yeah, it does slow us down. I think that's the very fair point, and I think that's a conscious call that we have taken,
Right.
because I think credit and aggression don't go together, right?
I like that. Right.
The truly the only sustainable differentiator to our platform and survival is going to be quality of the assets, right? And the quality of the returns that we're able to offer to investors.
Right.
We are very happy to go slower if it means going for higher quality, right? I think that's a principle that we're very, very clear on.
Right.
That said, we are still growing 35-40% month on month, right? Because we're very small, and B, the opportunity is very large.
Right.
I think what we are able to do is, once we focus on an asset and a type of company, we are able to scale with that company because they themselves are growing so fast.
Right. Interesting.
Maybe if I can give you an example, one of our first leases was a company called Zip, which does last mile delivery.
Right.
Over the last 1 year, on the back of tailwinds from COVID, the company has grown 5x, right, in terms of revenue and fleet.
Right.
You can imagine that if they grew 5x, our opportunities with them also grew, at a similar growth rate.
Interesting.
And that company is now, that's their story. But I think I think those are the kind of opportunities that we want to go more aggressive on.
Right.
For a period of time, as we build certain more capabilities focused on assets like vehicles, warehousing equipment, which are our focus, ambulances, we can then go more aggressive on those assets, right? Because we understand what to do with them in the case of a deal. And that's sort of the two-prong approach that we have taken.
Very interesting. Nikhil, I have a question on systemic risks, right? I mean, both of us have operated in the banking ecosystem. We understand, what these risks are, and I mean, every business you're taking a call on the economic condition of the country, and on the larger macroeconomic factors, right? I mean, COVID has been a very, very unfortunate event, right? And it's been a very unreal event in the sense that, it kind of disrupted everything that we'd built for last, say, 100 years, right? Since, say, independence, pre-independence, whatever, right? So we kind of grew in a certain form and way, and here comes something which kind of disrupts everything all of a sudden, right? We don't consume the way we did. We don't travel, say, the way we did, right? So everything that was built around all of these things, right, is kind of fallen apart, right? And it'll take certain time for it to sort of, say, gather clarity, come together and possibly offer a new solution or whatever, right? What has also happened is that the product longevity, right, or the requirements per se sets, right, is going to change very, very quickly, right? So that systemic risk is going to translate into some very, very business specific risks, right? How do you factor that in, right? Because, I mean, even the credit systems for that matter are not kind of, say, designed for that kind of a change, right? The markets are going to change very quickly. The influence is changing very, very quickly. That makes it a very complex condition, right? How are you looking at that as a business?
Yeah. I think we worry about this all the time. And the other thing that I have learned about credit in the last 1 year is there is no one way to prevent for risk.
Default.
Right? Absolutely. Right. You have to build as many as possible measures to protect for default. Okay.
Right.
And the way we have thought about it is we can do some amount of prediction, right?
Right.
Which is what all of us have to do about how a business may perform.
Sure.
But beyond that prediction, you have to then think of the next 5 or 6 things that you can't predict,
Right.
that will go wrong. Okay?
Right.
And how do you protect yourself and your investors from it? Just to elaborate, the view we take is that when we invest in when we identify an opportunity, we can probably have a view of the next 12 to 18 months. But things are changing so fast that we may not be able to take a call beyond that period of time.
Absolutely.
Okay? What we make sure is that our lease terms are only 24 to 36 months.
Okay.
Right? Which means that 18 months covers more than 50% of the lease term. So our visibility is for more than 50% of the lease term.
Right.
We take a security deposit on day one, which covers 10% of the investor's value.
Okay? Right.
Second is we accelerate the repayments such that in the first 18 months, almost 65% of the investor's capital is returned in the form of lease payments. Right?
Interesting. Okay.
So combined with the security deposit, 3/4 of the capital is already protected.
Right.
Then we are saying, assuming a default happens at the 18th month,
right,
can you at least recover 25% of the 100 rupees you put into an asset?
Which is a salvage value.
Salvage value, right?
Yeah.
I think in a lot of situations, that's a fair assumption to take.
Right.
What we need to do, or what we have done, is to build measures to recover and redeploy those assets or resell those assets.
Right.
And that's the view we have taken. So as a combination of initial analysis and diligence, taking a sectoral view, company view, combined with security deposit, accelerated repayments, and then measures to recover the asset, is how we think about protecting investors, right?
Interesting.
I don't think any of us can claim to be crystal ball gazers and really predict what will happen in this environment.
Right.
We can do that with the best of our intention and effort, but you need to build these measures to protect risk.
I agree. I think that's a fair point, right? I think that's a fair point. I think plus, while of course, all of us agree that, the situation has become very, very dynamic. I think India is a large market, right? Which essentially means that, things will change, but they might not change, for example, like in a very homogeneous economy, right? It's not going to happen overnight, right? And I think that's a fair point. And I think 18 months is a reasonable amount of time to sort of, I think in terms of the paybacks that you've structured and stuff like that, I think that's a reasonable comfort zone that you're kind of operating in.
Yeah.
Nikhil, another thing that we've seen, especially when you're looking at say credit and you're looking at say leasing and all of these aspects, right? Recovery is a massive problem when it comes to India as a country, as an economy, right? That's the most difficult across banking ecosystem, across the financial services ecosystem, right? The NBFC ecosystem for that, right? It's a very, very cumbersome process. There are other liabilities that sort of tend to seep in, right? Irrespective of how you're trying to protect your portfolio, there's always that risk that you're running, right? How do you cover for that? I mean, of course, there are newer laws that have come in, SARFAESI is coming in, a bunch of others, right? But it's still a very, very long process, right? It's a duress on the company and and how you're doing it. And as you grow in AUMs, this is something that you constantly kind of grappling with to optimize, right? And there is no perfect way, right? There's no system to sort of do that, right? How are you sort of taking care of this particular bit, especially when the asset is deployed at somebody else's facility or in the hands of the other person, right? So how are you sort of?
Yeah. First obviously is to ensure that you have lesser of those situations.
Sure.
Right? And one thing I'd like to add specific to your point on asset is we only lease assets that are revenue generating for a company. Okay. And this is psychologically a very important differentiator.
Right.
Because that is the last asset that someone will stop paying money for.
Right.
Okay. I will not lease you this chair that you're sitting on.
Right.
Because it doesn't generate any revenue for you, right?
Interesting.
But for Furlenco, that generates revenue. And hence we only lease revenue generating assets.
Okay.
It's also those assets that you will take more care of because they make money for you. All right. So if the unit economics of a company are positive, leasing those assets makes sense. That's the first thing that we do from an asset perspective.
Right.
Okay? Second is 90% of our assets are focused only in 3 asset categories.
Right.
Okay. While we are very diversified as a platform, but we are focused on 3 assets, which we believe we have a better ability to recover and resell. Okay.
Right.
The third point is, unlike the financial sector or the banking sector, we don't have the same obligations of going through the SARFAESI Act or NCLT as other companies have, because we own the assets.
Right.
Our investors own the assets, right?
Right.
And there are several Supreme Court judgments which basically say that we have the ability to recover our asset without going through any process, because we are the owner, right?
Right.
They cannot be considered in the assets of the company as it goes through liquidation. Right. So we have 100% ownership, which allows us with a greater degree of being able to take it back.
Interesting.
The challenge lies in the physical recovery.
Right.
Okay. And what we have done there is built partners.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in the case of vehicles, we have partnered with the roadside assistance company, which is present on a pan-India basis. That basically, and all of our assets are tagged with the GPS, right? So we know the location of them.
Okay.
We have basically partnered with this roadside assistance company to pick up our assets in the case of an event of default and bring it to their warehouses.
Right.
Okay? In the case of warehousing racks, we have partnered with the OEM of the warehouse, OEM of the rack or the vendor, to be able to identify opportunities to redeploy it. Right. So we have built such kind of partnerships for those core assets in a way to mitigate that risk.
Interesting.
The risk still exists, right?
Right.
But the question is that how much can you mitigate it?
Right.
If you remember the previous example I gave you of 75-25, right?
Right.
Assuming you invest 100 rupees in an asset, even if you were to only recover 50% of assets,
right,
and only recover 50% of value, you would still recover 25%, right? And that covers the investor's capital risk along with the repayments.
Right.
So by keeping that threshold so low, we have significant comfort that we will be able to protect investors' capital.
Right. Very interesting, Nikhil. I'm gonna step out of the product piece.
Sure.
I think we've talked quite a bit about it, right? And we've tried to sort of cover pretty much all the aspects, right, that are there. But before we get out, right, what have been some of the challenges, right, when you've sort of went, when you've gone on to sort of say build up this product, right, which is also the next question, right? Communication around opportunities like this is very, very difficult, right? And especially India is a very touch and feel trust market, right? Where you need to know somebody. So unless I know a Nikhil, right, I'll possibly not be very, say, comfortable, confident, right? So platform is something which has taken time beyond. For stocks and shares, it's very different because you're talking about a very different ecosystem, and it's an ecosystem which has survived for a very long time, right?
Yes.
There is this understanding that people have built around it and stuff like that, right? But even there, for example, people look for an advisor that they've known or is recommended. Referrals work very well, right? Here you are, who's all of a sudden offering a very different kind of an opportunity, right? While people understand some of these opportunities because the players like Ola and a bunch of others have kind of democratized such things where they've tried to sort of say aggregate investors to come in and deploy their vehicles and things like that and make a sort of a living out of it or make an earning out of it. You're still a relatively new platform. You essentially were born right in the middle of the pandemic, right? How has that journey been, right? In terms of being able to go out, communicate when you could do little, right? You can't really put your feet on the street, right? To go out, meet people, which is very typical a financial market practice, right? That bit is, what I mean, right? That bit is very important. Tell me a little more about that, right? How have you dealt with that?
I think trust is the most important commodity for building a financial product. Fully agree with you. And we realize that, why should anyone trust us? Right. We may be able to get the first, say, 100 users based on the fact that they know one of the founders or someone in the team. Right. But beyond that, growth is going to not come from people, or investment is not going to come from people in our direct circle.
Right.
We, and maybe there was a better way, but the way we thought about it was that we could leverage the trust our leases have.
Right.
Okay? Our leases have been around for far longer. And there is a certain trust about those companies.
Interesting. Right.
If we could leverage their brand,
right,
combined with tremendous amount of transparency, because transparency and trust go together,
right,
we are likely to be able to convince investors to participate with us. Right. And I think, we thought about the trust as a journey, and trust will keep changing, right? Or the levers that you have to provide trust will keep changing.
Right.
The first trust will have to be you, right? Will have to be the team. The second trust is your partners. The third trust could be your investors.
Right.
And the fourth trust has to be your users. All right. The fifth trust will be your performance.
Right.
Okay. So that's how we thought about trust. And we knew that we could not solve for all these things together.
Right.
So we solved only one piece at a time.
Sure.
we solved the first 100 users because of
And
trust on.
you thought of them in a sequence or independently? Because they are all independent pieces.
Yeah. But we realize that it will happen in a sequence, right? For example, performance can only happen after a year or 18 months.
Right.
It would be, no one would believe our performance after 6 months, right? It's not worth talking about.
Right.
So we thought of them as a sequence. And fortunately for us, things played out in that manner. So the first 100 users came because they knew someone in the team, right? The second trust that we built, we started doing webinars by every 2 weeks. We used to invite the founder of the company we're leasing to talk to our users, right? And hence people started seeing that, this company is on the platform, right? And the founders talking about it, that means this money is really going where they're talking.
Right.
And we started providing tremendous amount of information on our platform about how these deals are doing, what's happening. So we piggybacked on the trust of the companies.
Right. Interesting.
We then ended up raising our first round of capital, and those investors, including individuals like Anupam Mittal and Maninder Gulati, brought trust because they invested with the platform.
Right.
The fourth trust is users, and about 2 months back we launched a referral program. Okay, because we believe that users would now be ready to refer someone else, having seen the traction on Grip. And very proud to share that 15% of our users have already referred someone else, right?
Interesting.
Referral is the sort of the last sign of really liking a platform.
Correct. Conviction. Yeah.
Conviction. So the fact that in 2 months, 15% of our users have used it, I think has further displayed that trust. The last one is performance, right? And I think that's going to start playing out now, where we have completed a year, not had any defaults, and people are going to trust the brand for the kind of deals it brings to itself.
Interesting. Nikhil, so you said, you'd mentioned there's about 3,000 investors which are on the Grip platform, who are betting with you. Let me put this way, right? What is, I mean, if there's no problem, right? If you can share, right? What is a typical transaction size that an investor is entering a relationship, at with you? And, please go ahead.
It's about ₹100,000 that the person starts a relationship with. But as I mentioned, a lot of people reinvest, right? 50% people are on the second investment, 10% on the fifth investment. So the average portfolio of an investor on Grip is now more than ₹200,000.
Interesting. That is interesting, right? Also, is this becoming a part of the larger portfolio that people have, or is this still in a very infancy sort of a zone in the minds of investors, right? What are your thoughts about that? I mean, because this is something which will, I mean, my sense is, I think with the growing confidence, it will eventually become part of the portfolio, right? Has that already started to happen, or early days for that?
I would say early days, because if you see the top, I would say 100 users, still have only maybe 25 lakhs rupees plus on the platform. So the investor base is very diversified, right? I think, Anshu, somewhere we are also responsible for that. We don't advise investors to put a significant part for the portfolio on Grip. All right.
Okay.
I mean, we have to understand that we're an alternative investment asset class. Global advisors are talking about 15 to 20% allocation to alternative assets of your person's portfolio. Grip is one of those options. There are many other options, and investors should diversify, right? It may seem counterproductive for me to say it, but I think that's the healthy way to build a portfolio. And we don't advise investors to build a large allocation on Grip. They should think of this as one way to diversify their total portfolio and allocate a certain amount of money, whether it's 5 to 6% of their portfolio on Grip, but nothing more than that.
Very interesting. I think that's a very mature, input that you have, Nikhil. I think not a lot of founders would sort of typically say that, right? But that's an amazing piece of advice that you have for people, right? Nikhil, currently, what the businesses that you're kind of working with, right? Are these businesses that are operating in a tier A city, tier 2 city? Where are you at right now? Are these large funded urban market opportunities that you're focusing on, or are you also looking at Bharat? And I have a next follow-up question on Bharat, right? So with this, we'll sort of move into that one.
Yeah. I would say majority of our opportunities are today urban city opportunities, or businesses that are operating in urban cities. Some of them obviously are now beginning to cater to the Bharat. I would say, if looking at our pipeline, that there are definitely a few opportunities that we're very excited about, which are core Bharat opportunities. Right. And it's not that we are we have a selection criteria that says no to them. I think we want to make sure that any company that comes meets certain credit criteria of scale, right?
Right.
Of certain achievement of business.
Right.
And as more Bharat opportunities get created, I think you'll start seeing more of those on our platform as well. So it's a natural process that will start happening.
Interesting. Nikhil, I have a thought around Bharat, right? I mean, Bharat is far more complicated than what we see, right? I mean, urban India to a certain extent is kind of getting homogeneous, right? Because the kind of education that we have, the kind of working environment that we have. I think cultural sort of say, culturally they are very similar, right? Barring just what 5-7% variations here and there, right? I think, but the larger audience is kind of becoming homogeneous, right? Bharat is not the case. Bharat is far more complex, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a UP is going to operate in a different way, an MP is going to operate in a different way, Chhattisgarh is going to operate in a completely different way, right? The priorities are different, right? And as soon as you start talking to all of these, all of these areas, the geopolitical risk is also different, and the systemic risk is also different, right? So you are kind of in a slightly different zone, so you're not talking about only just the economic or the systemic risk at a national level, but then you're sort of also factoring in the systemic risk within that area, right? Because of all of variety of factors, right? I mean, how excited are you about that opportunity, right? Or do you think it's something which is going to take a little more time to sort of play out, right? Bharat could be very interesting. Bharat could take a little time than how we sort of how we anticipate the way we're celebrating it, right? It could take a little more time to sort of play itself out.
Yeah. So going back to Chalo,
Sure.
Chalo in some ways was a semi-Bharat opportunity, right? Because we were not serving as many tier 1 cities as tier 2 cities.
Sure.
If I could just, Chalo's buses were operated in Jabalpur,
Right.
Mangalore, Udupi, Shimoga,
Right.
Patna, Guwahati, right? So not core Bharat as people would think of it, but still a lot of the tier 2 cities. And I completely understand what you're talking about. Each of these cities is different. There are different regional, cultural aspects that you need to factor in terms of how you think of product design and execution.
Right.
But somewhere there is obviously a common link that exists between them and a huge market opportunity.
Right.
I think generally we are seeing businesses really be able to go after the opportunity. They're obviously having to tweak their business models, but they're seeing considerable success as they think about it. I also believe that over a period of time, a lot of common traits have come across, and you have enough of the digital platforms for content to thank for that, right? Ultimately, you're seeing the same thing get consumed, and people are sort of replicating it. Like think about how the West has changed, how Indians dress, think, what we watch. In my generation, Friends sort of set the culture tone for how we communicate and think about it, right? So I think that transition through mobile and now free data, tremendous amount of content is changing that. So I think that that will also change over a period of time. Our business will naturally go in that direction, right? At the same time, we will always keep in mind something that is a business that is established, that is diversified. We will probably start with companies that have more of a B2B model rather than a B2C model in that space. I'll not mention the company because we're still not launched the deal yet, but there is a company which does collection, storage of milk from farms in India and delivers them to some of the milk majors or the FMCG companies for consumption, right? Very interesting product because they've actually they own the IP for the storage, the cold storage of that product. And we are now thinking about how we can help them scale by providing assets on lease. I think, and they're present across the country. I think those are the kind of opportunities that we will first go with when we go to Bharat. Because they are established, they have B2B contracts, but still ultimately coming down to the rural economy, I think those are interesting for us.
I think that's an interesting point that you've highlighted, Nikhil. I think this entire celebration, this entire exuberance around Bharat, right? I think a lot of people are doing that without essentially understanding the complexities around it, right? And like you highlighted, right? You'll have to be very, very picky in terms of the kind of opportunities that you sort of do. And I like particularly the B2B aspect that you highlighted, right? And I think I understand dairy tech very well. We have certain interest in the dairy tech space, right? So, and I understand where you're coming from. I think identifying those smaller, sharp opportunities is essentially should play out well, right? And I think that's a more sensible way of doing that. I think that's a reflection of how you are looking at the model, right? Which is cultivating more sustainable, strong model, right, where it gets you the time to understand the market better, right, and the regional complexities better. Nikhil, what are the next 5 years like? Right? I think there's an interesting product that you've built, right? There's some phenomenal ground that you've covered, right, in the last say 9-10 months, right? What's the next 5 years like? You've raised some capital, right? Tell us a little more about that as well.
Sure.
And the next 5 years for Drip.
Sure. Let me answer your second part of the question first. So we raised a pre-Series A about 5 crore rupees in back in November 2020. But about 3 weeks back, we signed a term sheet to raise our Series A. We're doing a $3 million Series A round. Hope to announce it in a couple of weeks from now. But that obviously provides us with significant capital to grow the team and the business to achieve our next sort of business milestones. If I was to think of the next 5 years, there are a few strategic focus areas.
I think it's an unfair question, right? I think 5 years is just too long, right? I think let's just bring it down to 2 years, right? I think
sure. I think that's a bet. Honestly, I think beyond that visibility, it's
that was too much of a granddad question. 5 years. Give me a 2 year perspective.
Yeah. So I think our business focus, if was from a numbers perspective, is to get our portfolio, which is currently around 55 crores, to actually 1,000 crore mark. That's the business targets we're going after.
Wonderful.
From a product perspective, we see tremendous opportunities in leasing, but we're also seeing opportunities in related financial products, okay, which can tap into the same ecosystem. As an example, inventory financing, right? Very similar OEMs, very similar partner companies to work with. And we're looking to introduce 1 or 2 other assets, playing on the common theme of being asset-backed. Asset-backed to companies, right? That's the credit risk that we're comfortable playing with. And so we're looking to see if we can do some pilots to expand our product set. The third priority is constantly focus on how to reduce the risk of the investor. So we're thinking about how we can build, for example, a first loss guarantee program, where an institutional investor or ourselves can take the first loss for investors and further protect their risk. I think that's really important for us. And the fourth piece is how can we offer the investor a better experience from even an investment, right? A lot of investors, for example, have asked us, can we do a SIP? Can you create a SIP product for us? A lot of investors have told us, instead of a 2 to 3 year deal, can we get liquidity in the middle? Can we trade our lease ownership, right? And I think those are interesting financial products to think about. So that's, I think the next 2 years we'll also see some innovation from our side on those products for investors. So I think these are the main directions in which the business is likely to go over the next 2 years.
I think it was a phenomenal discussion, Nikhil. I mean, this is a space that I've been particularly excited about, right? I mean, coming from the banking ecosystem, I mean, you looked at real estate, right? And I think it was limited to that, right? Which essentially meant that there was a huge outflow of capital which would happen, and typically a lot of retail investors couldn't really sort of participate, right? And they had literally no option but to sort of say only depend on traditional instruments, right? But here you are, with many opportunities now that are available for people, right? And at a value which is just about 100,000 rupees. Is phenomenal, right? I think this is literally sort of democratizing of options where they can actually go in and invest and then have a certain recurring payment out of it, which is and they're not by themselves, right? They're not on their own to sort of figure out the dynamics, nuances, semantics around all of this, right? There is a professional help which is available. There's a professional structuring which is happening around that option, right? And I think that's something which should be adopted. Personally, I think I believe that this is something that should be adopted by many people. And I think this is something that we need as a country, right? So we need more people to channelizing money, right, outside of typical banking ecosystems directly into companies, right? And I think that's where your role becomes all the more important, right? Nikhil, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thanks so much, Anshu.
Hopefully, we'll have you soon with us across a bunch of other exciting discussions.
Very happy to do that. Thank you so much for this. Pleasure speaking to you.
Same here.
Bye. Take care.
Thanks.